all. I'm Becky Ploeger. I'm the Global Head of Reservations and Customer Care at Hilton and the moderator of today's session for CCW. This is an all-stars panel for the future of contact center technology, game changers for customer contact in the next 5 years, and how COVID-19 reshaped the landscape. So this panel discussion features the movers and shakers in the customer contact technology market. And we will discuss the future landscape of CX and the full landscape. So without further ado, let me have our panel of all-stars introduce themselves along with a broad overview of the topic today. So G, can you kick us off?
Absolutely, thank you, Becky. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. I am Gabriele Masili, I go by G. I am the VP and Chief Technology Officer for the Customer Experience and Success organization at Microsoft. So I'm in charge of the technology teams and the work we do to digital transform the customer experience, both for our final customers as well as our internal users. Excited to be here today.
All right, welcome. Thank you, G. Ed.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon. Ed Creasey. I am the Director of Pre-Sales for Calabrio, and my job is really helping be the glue really between our product and our customers. And so I spend a lot of time understanding people's problems and matching them to the analytics and workforce engagement tools we do today. And I guess, you know, my thoughts on today is the customer experience and the contact center have never been more important than they are today. So it's a really exciting time to talk about customers and empathy and employees and bots. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to today.
Me too. All right, Jagrit.
Great. Hi, Jagrit Malhotra with Clarabridge. I'm Managing Director here with a couple of areas of responsibility. I manage our digital customer service business globally and also look after our customer experience and contact center analytics here in Europe and the Middle East. Based in London, and prior to Clarabridge, spent pretty much my entire career in the field of analytics. Really excited about the conversation today, like all of you. Looking forward to getting into topics like digital transformation, automation, remote working, obviously artificial intelligence. No conversation like this is complete without that topic, but it's an exciting time, like Ed mentioned, with I think the convergence of customer experience and contact center coming closer and closer together. I think it's a very appropriate conversation for today.
Oh, I'm excited. What I hear is that all of you are troublemakers. No, I mean problem solvers, right? So I'm looking forward to hearing what you have in store for us. So let's just start with some questions. As we all know, the pandemic has reshaped many industries, accelerated many trends. So I want to know, what do you see as the biggest movements in the contact center and CX space? And a second part of that, so many of you guys represent the US market and the European market. So I want to understand if you see any differences between the two. G, why don't you start on this one?
Thanks, Becky. So when I look at what happened over the last few months, I mean, the landscape completely changes, and this is a global trend. So we see that across all of our markets in the different countries in the world. It is different, though. It manifests itself in different ways depending on the level of technology maturity of the country. One big movement we have seen is people starting to work from home, and so all of our contact center workforce, as an example, had to move to work from home within days. In some places that was relatively smooth. In some other places it was more difficult because the local infrastructure didn't support the connectivity requirements. Then there are all the security needs that we need to keep into account when you have, you know, thousands and thousands of people working from their houses. So a couple of things to take into considerations. Another big trend I've seen being accelerated over the last few months has been the move to digital. Well, the rush to digital, I would say. Some have said that the digital transformation in the last 6 months has been what was originally planned for the next 12 years. And I think it's accurate. If I look at the industry, I mean, both Becky, as you know, as part of the CCW advisory board, we hear from all the colleagues in the industry, and it happens across the board. The people is moving to digital faster and faster. That's the good news, because I think it helped accelerate some of the good trends. The bad news is that some companies are simply not ready or not fully ready. So the rush into digital created problems for the customers. The experiences were broken. They were not designed to be digital, and we're just rushing them to adapt to digital solutions. So I think there is still a lot of patching and recovering that is happening in the industry, trying to bring to quality the experiences that were pushed to the customers a little bit too early or a little bit too fast.
Very interesting. I do know, and we do hear from the same peers about the big push to digital. And you're right. Some of it was because of necessity, and it went a little faster than, getting that experience right. So interesting. Ed, what's your take on this?
Well, I enjoy mystery shopping. I used to be a mystery shopper about 20 years ago. Most of you probably don't remember what it is, but you remember like the hidden cameras and the mystery phone calls. And whenever I speak to organizations, I'm always kind of screenshotting or looking for transcripts and trying to illustrate the customer journey. And I think to G's point, things have moved so fast. When digital journeys work, it's sweet. But when they go wrong, it's seriously painful. And that leads to a couple of major trends I've seen, right? So number one, I think my happiest trend, because I was an agent and a contact center manager, is the whole organization is looking at the contact center now, because retail has been affected, if not closed. Headquarters is closed. There's one front of house, and that's the contact center. But as G said, that's fundamentally shifted to a home environment. So suddenly we've got employees facing a different set of challenges. And I think what we've seen at Calabrio when we're doing like, how do you schedule agents and how do you make sure they have the right shifts, is real innovation, not just split shifts, micro shifts where you've got 30 minutes when the children finally have done what they said they were going to do. You can maybe take a few phone calls or answer a few chats. That's changed the channel mix, really. So we find a lot of organizations moving to digital because that's the only thing their employees can do, because voice is really hard with the background noise, as we know that. So some really interesting disruptions. I think one of my favorite CX trends is, we did some research back in May, and 300 US and UK managers said the number one thing they've seen from customers is a need for more empathy, which I'm very happy about. And I think we've seen the power of what humans can do. Suddenly, we as humans were able to pivot to a completely different environment with different technology and still give a great CX. So really exciting times. Final point I'd say, AI is probably still a bit of work in progress. As those handoffs from bot to human, from messaging to voice, we really need to think more about that.
That's right. I love that you brought up the human element. At Hilton, we're looking at how we humanize the digital elements. We've already humanized the human interaction, right, in hospitality, but humanizing that digital experience and having that seamless handoff, I think, is super, super important. Jagrit, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with G and Ed. I mean, really the digital transformation has kind of taken us all by storm, right? I mean, it's been, I would say, almost exponential. It's been exponential, right, in the acceleration of digital transformation. I see many reasons for that, but working and living from home kind of makes that an obvious element, right? When you have hundreds of thousands of millions of contact center agents now working from home, just to Ed's point, right, are the best way to communicate in that type of a setting. So absolutely, we've seen huge acceleration there. The other couple of things we've seen is just a lot greater adoption of automation capability. The industry as a whole has been talking about automation capabilities for time, but especially in certain industries where there's been that spike in activity because of the pandemic, because of COVID, we've seen this increased adoption all of a sudden of automation capability. So we have the ability to automate post-call work or what we call flow bots, which are really digital IVR. And all of a sudden, we've seen a huge uptick in adoption in those areas. And I think a lot of it just goes back to the first big movement we talked about, which is digital acceleration. Because of digital transformation, acceleration in that, all of a sudden you have these digital channels now being used a lot more. They're so much easier to automate than anything else, than your legacy channels. And so the two kind of go hand in hand. And then I think the last thing, the other thing we've seen is just a lot more focus on QA and QM initiatives, right? And from a couple of different perspectives. One, again, the automation aspect, right? because automation, everybody's looking for it right now because of the efficiencies, because of the accuracy. So if you can all of a sudden automatically score 100% of your interactions, that's so much more efficient, so much more accurate than manually sampling a couple of interactions. And that all of a sudden seems to be so much more relevant in sort of the pandemic days, right? And then obviously, because so many agents are no longer in the controlled environment of the contact center, quality all of a sudden is just so much more important, so much more front and center for organizations to tackle. And so I'd say those are the kind of the three sort of areas that we've sort of really see come to the fore because of the pandemic.
Yeah, thanks for that. I love that you brought QA into it. The
Yeah.
quality of the interaction is super important to measure.
Right. Exactly.
All right, so shifting over, this is, I think, is going to be my favorite question. So how has customer behavior, and I look at customers as your external customers or guests in Hilton's case, and your agents, right, are our customers internally. How has their behavior changed, and how has your organization changed to prepare for the new normal? Secondarily, how can the industry better prepare themselves? So Jagrit, why don't you start on this one?
Yeah, you know, I think we're all going to sound a little bit like a broken record here, but it's very similar to what corporations I think are going through with digital transformation. Let's face it, we're all going through with accelerated digital adoption, right? You know, I think about my daily life, right? I got an Amazon parcel that shows up almost every day at my doorstep, right? I got my Ocado grocery delivery, you know, online, and that comes in once a week. Nobody goes to bank branches anymore, and let's face it, we're all consuming way too much content on streaming platforms, right? And those are all, you know, great examples of digital adoption, right? And I think, you know, the one that I think we can all point to, because we're all on that platform right now, right, is the one that sort of, I'd say, deserves sort of special mention is just the digital collaboration platforms, right? Obviously, video conferencing capabilities. I think you think about this year, right? And I'd say it's pretty simple to say this year would have been absolutely unimaginable, right, without those platforms, whether it was collaborating with our colleagues at work, whether it was, you know, connecting with friends and family around the globe on platforms like Zoom or GoToMeeting or House Party, right? And I think that, you know, kind of drives to another point that we're seeing from a corporate perspective, is just sort of a boom in analytical capabilities on those digital collaboration platforms, because I think there's such a huge focus and such a huge usage of them. All of a sudden, people are saying, wait a second, we need to get a lot better understanding of how those are being used. How can we make them way more effective? How can we make them way more efficient and user-friendly for our consumers? So I'd say those are a few aspects that we're seeing from a consumer standpoint.
That's great. And I like how you said having the data is one thing, actioning the data, leveraging those analytics tools, I think are super important.
Exactly.
How about you, Ed?
Yeah, I think if we baseline what our customers were telling us from our research, you know, we thought expectations were high, they got higher. As I said, the need for more empathy, although I think we saw that change, you know, March, April, there was a lot of empathy. We were all in the same boat. I think we've seen that dissipate somewhat. Customers wanted even more channels, and those interactions that got to an assisted agent got more complex. That all happened. Here's a problem we haven't solved. All that data is in silos still. In fact, to some of the points earlier, people transformed so fast, they took on new channels really, really quickly, and it kind of got worse. So as I say, going back to my mystery shopping examples, what I'm finding is really disjointed customer journeys. You know, you're in sort of asynchronous messaging, and you're speaking to every message you send, you're speaking to a different employee, and then you go off into live chat, and you can't share photos, and then you finally go back to the employee sat there in a contact center, and they don't have a single view of what's going on. They have maybe, you know, social here and chat here and voice here, and they have their workforce management here. And I think that's a big issue, is with more complexity in the world, how difficult is it when you're sat inside an organization to understand the customer journey, to understand employee performance? As a customer, I don't think I'm feeling it. I'm feeling some disjointed, siloed journeys. One other angle on that is analytics. I think the research said that a need for more analytics generally, more understanding of customer sentiment, all that good stuff. But one thing I picked up was the need for more operational insight on people's performance. And I think, again, this is all linked to that lack of single view of employee performance. Is, you know, if my employees are suddenly at home, how do I know how they're doing? Some people are in some difficult environments, some home environments, whether it's just practically or even just, from a safety perspective, it's a difficult place for people to be. How do I see that? And how can I start to anticipate the needs of my employees? I think that's another big area we've got to work on.
Yeah, for sure. The health and safety of our agents is of utmost importance. When I look at how we were at Hilton prior to the pandemic, my US-based agents were all work at home. 99% of them were work at home already. So I didn't have that massive rush of change to get them to be work at home. But what did change is now I have kids at home that need to be homeschooled and fed all day. I have, parents at home that might need to be taken care of. Lots of stress with the social unrest in the US and the obviously upcoming election, just causing a lot of stressors. So bringing in that empathy to your employees was even important. I know empathy to our guests is always important, but more empathy toward each other too came into play. All right, let's talk about cloud. Ready? Will cloud gain more momentum in the post-COVID-19 business world? What do you think? Who wants to start?
Let me jump into this. So, well, it's clearly acceleration of the cloud adoption has been incredible if we look at what happened just recently. And that's true across all the cloud providers out there, both in terms of raw infrastructure, storage, connectivity, etc., as well as cloud-based service, so SaaS offerings. And that is pretty important, I believe, because it empowered millions of people across the globe to get a quality of service within minutes, what would before just be impossible otherwise with on-premises installations without having the infrastructure built up on years. So pretty cool from that standpoint. And in terms of the customer shift, what we saw is that there is higher and higher demand, very, very low tolerance for anything that is not perfect. So, the pandemic in itself doesn't change the fact that the customers expect the best possible service in all cases. To Ed's point earlier, for a lot of them, it became increasingly vital because it replaced some physical presence, retailers that shifted towards online, as an example, or all the learning. We had a massive movement with universities and schools adopting Teams, which is our collaboration cloud-based platform. So to be able to continue doing lessons, to continue to teach people. And all of that would not be possible unless the quality of the service would be impeccable. So with a shift, I haven't seen any change in tolerance, quite the opposite. I've seen a raise in expectations from a customer standpoint, and therefore the organizations had to adapt to satisfy that raise in expectation in the best possible way. And we have seen that translating on the employees and on our support teams in the need for them to be even more empathetic, while, as you say, Becky, they're struggling on their own personal situations. Each one of them will have one or more constraints that are very different than what we have in our work from office environment before. And even for the ones that were working from home, the circumstances massively changed. Some of our colleagues in some countries, as an example, ended up having 3-4 people sharing an apartment. One thing is if you're working from home alone. One other thing is that now suddenly you have 4 people on 4 different phone calls in 4 rooms in the same apartment. So clearly, all those situations require even more empathy and engagement. And we had to run campaigns to bring the people together and to support each other. And we relaxed a lot of constraints to help them to be more flexible and adapt to their new needs. We recently announced that even when we're going to be able to come back to the office, we have up to 50% work from home, complete flexibility. No authorization required, nothing, just, if you want to be flexible, just do it. And that is a major change in the way that companies are operating.
Absolutely. Anybody else want to weigh in on this one?
Yeah, I'd say, if there's one thing that the pandemic has sort of reinforced, it's that need for flexibility and agility, right? And to me, that's what the cloud has been delivering for a while now. It kind of delivered it really well during the pandemic, and I think it's going to continue doing that even at a at a better rate and a more accelerated rate, moving forward. I think we've all talked about the scenario with agents having to work from home overnight. I mean, without cloud solutions, without cloud infrastructure, I think we all know that would have been absolutely impossible, right? I mean, ourselves, for our customer experience and contact center analytics solutions, for our digital customer experience, we probably saw about a 50% increase in usage at the peak of the pandemic. And the really interesting thing was even when things sort of calmed down a little bit there shortly, or briefly in June and July, we thought things would come right back down, but those usage levels kind of sustained, right? And that was really interesting. So I think, based on all the learnings from this year, I think organizations, corporations around the globe are going to be, I think, preparing in many ways to react more quickly. And I can't imagine that the cloud is not going to be a key part of that strategy, right? So, yeah.
And I think, just sorry to jump in there, just one thing I noticed though, there isn't one way of doing it anymore. What I find is there's some really disruptive vendors out there, right? I mean, we've got G here with, I never thought Microsoft Teams would be an instinct to me, right? It's like, I feel it's weird when someone's video is not on. But what I've seen is there's some vendors who are kind of like, you buy it in a box. And some customers love that because they don't want to make something bespoke. And you get some vendors who are kind of like, like a sandbox, and you build your own thing. And I think I have a lot of conversations because what we do is we try and integrate with everyone. We know like the communication platforms are really important and CRM is really important. And we try and do everything in between. And yeah, so I think build or buy is a big conversation. Be careful of the lock-in. That, yeah, it's great having these platforms that do everything, but make sure you haven't got handcuffs on. And so I think that's some of the decisions I think customers need to kind of do a bit of know thyself. How do you want to be in the cloud? Do you want to connect in with lots of other clouds, or do you want to just lock in with one vendor? So I think it's not just what we buy, but it's how we do it.
Yeah, really.
May, Becky, may I jump in again on this?
Of course.
Just to add one element is what I'm seeing in Europe specifically is a very heightened attention to privacy and security at the local element. So more and more countries in Europe are asking for localized environments. So even in a cloud-based solution, they want to contain their data within their country for a lot of applications, financial, medical applications, governments. And so from a usability standpoint, that requires adaptation in the infrastructure and requires providers that can have that dynamic solution that can adapt to the need, localizing the requirements of where the data is accessed, as an example. And security is the other element of that. So again, we're seeing more and more that require very high level of security. We offer security as part of the design of the infrastructure, but when it comes to defining how security is going to be different in France versus in Italy versus Spain, as an example, I think it's very important, again, to understand what are the local requirements if we are now advising other companies on how to adopt cloud-based solutions.
So good. Yeah, from a business perspective, I've always had the mentality of cloud first, not cloud only. Like, make sure it makes sense for your business and that ROI is there. But I tell you, during the pandemic, it's allowed us to stretch and shrink much more efficiently than it would if we were on-prem. All right, one last question, because we're running out of time, but this is a good one. Is conversational AI finally here? And are we prepared for it? Who wants that one?
How about I go first on this one? So let me start with, I think it's definitely here, right? But to be honest, I'm not convinced we're ready for it, right? And I think there's two related reasons I'd like to point out. One, I think I still see a lot of frustration from consumers, customers, the end customers in interacting with conversational AI. And then two, related to that, I still see way too many failed projects, failed conversational AI initiatives with our clients, with our prospective clients, right? And so, those are I'd say the two primary reasons. And just recently, we were working with a prospective client, and they're talking about using our conversational analytics platform to improve their customer satisfaction, their quality assurance initiatives, their customer experience insights. And we were doing that by sort of bringing together all their calls, live chats, emails, social media, surveys. And it was interesting was the leader of their customer service organization, he turns to us and he goes, look, what we've had this really disastrous chatbot initiative. And what I'd like you to do is take all this data that you're bringing together, and I'd like you to come up with insights from it that can then be an invaluable input into our next generation of chatbot capability to help model that chatbot in the first place, to optimize it on an ongoing basis. And to be honest, that's a requirement and a need that we're hearing from customer after customer after customer, which to me tells me that the underlying technology isn't quite there. So is it here? Is it here to stay? Absolutely. I mean, I think that's evidenced by the hundreds of companies that are in that space, the hundreds of startups that are in that space. But the bigger question to me is the technology far enough along where it is actually delivering on the goals and the promises that corporations are trying to achieve by implementing these technologies? And that's the part I'm not quite convinced on yet,
Yeah, I would give it a yes and no myself. Yeah. It's definitely here. We use it in a couple of ways. We have a digital assistant in our workforce management tool that works with scheduling the agents. It will offer agents, time off, or offer agents overtime proactively. We use it with our QA tool where we predict people's quality or NPS. And I think those simple tools are working well. Here's my challenge, right? Is we've seen with facial recognition to start with, where these models were built on training data that wasn't fair. That wasn't fairly distributed amongst ethnic minorities. In that case, let's look at speech recognition. A lot of the standard benchmarking models are built on white men from the Midwest. And so you might get 95% accuracy for a white man from the Midwest, but take a female with an accent, from the South, you're going to get a different score. And that's where I think we need to be a lot smarter about and simpler about how we use AI. Let's make sure it's fair, it works, it's accurate enough, it's actionable, and the use cases are there. So, and of course, those handoffs, they're going to happen from bots to agent, and you've got to expect them to happen. And I'm fed up with getting stuck with bots. It's happening in every journey I seem to have at the moment.
That's right. We are obviously on our chatbot journey. Xiaoxi, which is our chatbot in China, just served its millionth guest and has over 70% deflection rate. So it's working, but you have to nurture it. It needs care and feeding and burping and changing diapers. It's like growing a human, right? And you really need to take that time. You don't just deploy it and then you're done. G, how about some final words from you?
Yeah, you are spot on, Becky. I think that's the key for every modern conversational AI initiative. First of all, I want to separate the chatbots per se with conversational AI. A lot of the chatbots that we see around are simply Q&A bots, very primitive, based on keyword recognition, and therefore not so accurate. When we look at the conversational AI space, there is a speech recognition capability. If we're talking about voice, there is a cognitive service implementation that allows you to understand what the customer needs. There is intent recognition. There is not only keywords. So it's much more evolved. But the key is it has to be an open system that allows the subject matter experts, the users, to contribute to the system, to train the system over time. I don't believe for a second that a system can come off the shelf and immediately be 100% accurate. It's not even 20% accurate. In our own journey on the systems, we sell to customers, but we built internally, basically. We are customer zero for those systems. I have seen quality going from the single-digit resolution rate, which was 2.5 years ago. Now we are over 50% resolution rate in terms of accuracy. And that takes time, to your point. It takes people to train the system, to evolve the system. The good news is that the good systems today allow subject matter experts to contribute without software engineering capabilities. So while before you need a team of engineers to actually tune the system, right now you can have your contact center experts, if it's a support system, working with the system to bring their knowledge into the system. And who is better positioned than that? They talk with customers, deal with customers every day. They know exactly what the customers need and how to solve their problems. So that's the new frontier, I believe, when the users can contribute to the technology, and then the technology becomes only a way to augment human capabilities rather than a competitive solution.
That's right. I love it. Well, thank you guys. We are out of time, but hopefully this was helpful and you enjoyed our session. A big shout out to G and Jagrit and Ed. Thank you so much for your insights, and we look forward to seeing you all in person soon. All right.
Thank you very
Bye,
much.
everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.